Yeah, well, COP22 is an absolutely essential meeting, and I'm very grateful to the government of Morocco for stepping up and not only hosting it, but also making it the right kind of meeting. They've always set a tone, and this is absolutely appropriate, of action. This is the first COP after the Paris Agreement was struck last year, a historic agreement after many, many decades of hard work by the global community to address climate change. We finally came up with what I consider a necessary but not sufficient structure to address our global climate goals. That structure depends on countries setting forward targets and then actually implementing them. So COP22 is the first COP after Paris and is now focusing not on the goal setting part, but the implementation part. So that part is a key element of how Paris will be successful. We're talking about that in the context of this meeting over the entire 2 weeks. There's a number of sort of independent pieces of that have to be negotiated and agreed. For example, how do we share data? How do we ensure that other countries looking at implementation can understand and have the information they need to see whether countries are actually following through with their goals. So that's what's really up for discussion. And I also have to again commend the government of Morocco and the Minister Al Haytham for setting the right tone of action and implementation for this COP. This panel was about an interesting and unusual panel, I think. It was a panel that was in the civil society area, talking about what the Latin American countries and the Caribbean and the Arab world with Middle East, North Africa can actually learn from each other, and also what they can actually show to the world in terms of their leadership on renewable energy deployment. We are at a moment now where obviously there's been many countries all around the world who have been looking at their own national situations, trying to figure out how best to serve the various needs that they have, including development, providing electricity to their citizens, providing public health to their citizens, providing jobs to their citizens, as well as contributing to these global climate goals that we're talking about at COP22. The event that we had today was focused on a specific region, a region that's actually shown an incredible amount of leadership globally on deploying low-carbon energy sources. There's been very, very important contributions by Morocco, in particular in solar and wind. There's a lot of countries across North Africa and in the Middle East who have been looking at and investing in low-carbon energy sources that are feeding off of the great resources that you have here with solar and wind power in particular. There's also a similar amount of activity happening in Latin America, and Brazil is a very good example, not only with the hydro investments they made in the past, but are rapidly accelerating their investments in solar and wind. There's also very kind of ambitious goals by Mexico and other places in Latin America. The interesting thing here is that I think that compared to some of the other bigger areas like Europe and the United States, we've of course been doing rapid deployment of renewables as well. But it's actually one of the more dynamic areas to look at Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America. As other countries try to think about what they can do, Middle East, North Africa, and Latin America have provided really interesting examples of how to combine the investments in low-carbon technology that drives their development agendas forward, their economic development agenda forward, but also to do it in this way that's clean and climate-friendly. And I think that a lot of other countries around the world can learn from that, not just sort of small countries, but also many of the large ones. So one of the things that is very important now in this stage of implementing our Paris goals is not just for governments to set policies, but is really for all of the stakeholders in the national circumstance to actually help with that implementation process. That's been one of the philosophies of the Paris Agreement. It's actually one of the philosophies of COP22, which is this is a multi-stakeholder implementation. One of the areas that's quite important, in addition to governments learning from each other, governments doing what they have to do to set the right policy tone, is actually for the other stakeholders to collaborate and think about creatively what they can do better. Corporations, NGOs, research organizations. In my particular area, I'm at a university and I've done work in the past with the US administration on implementing climate targets. It is very important, in my view, for countries to build up their own internal research and analytical capacity to help inform their governments specifically about the issues related to the NDC or target implementation. not only on the resilience and adaptation side, but also on the low carbon energy side. So I think there's an opportunity for us as research organizations, analytical communities, to help support that implementation at the government level, not only for the goals that we've already set, but also to help them understand better what they might be able to do in the future. And that's something that will add up to the ambition that we hope to have to actually realize the goals in the Paris Agreement.